227 wasn't just a sitcom. It captured Black family life through humor, warmth, and resilience. For years, it felt like those characters would live forever exactly as we remembered them. But behind the laughter, real life was far more brutal than any punchline. Illness, financial struggles, broken families, and sudden deaths rewrote every ending. So what really happened to them in 2026? Stay with us as we reveal where they are now and what you were never told. Marla Gibbs as Mary Jenkins. Mary Jenkins, the outspoken, resilient heart of 227, 1985 to 1990, was portrayed by Marla Gibbs. At 54 years old, she began the series in 1985, not only starring as the lead, but quietly shaping the show behind the scenes. Success came, but only after decades of being overlooked. Margaret Teresa Bradley, born June 14, 1931, in Chicago, Illinois, entered acting late and paid dearly for it. After years of rejection, she broke through as Florence on The Jeffersons, earning acclaim but also a damaging label. For years, casting directors saw only Florence, never the full range she possessed. When 227 arrived, Gibbs fought to control her own narrative, co-producing the series and proving she could lead, write, and build opportunity where none was offered. Even then, the pressure to succeed financially and creatively never eased. Balancing career and family left lasting strain. Her marriage to Jordan Gibbs ended in divorce in 1973, leaving her to raise 3 children while working exhausting hours. For years, she held a day job at United Airlines while filming television at night, a grind that left little room for rest or emotional recovery. The guilt of choosing work over home followed her for decades. Health concerns surfaced quietly over time, shaped by stress and relentless work. Though she avoided major public illness, Gibbs spoke openly about exhaustion, ulcers, and the long-term toll of pushing herself to survive in an industry that rewarded youth and punished aging, especially for Black women. Today, Marla Gibbs is 95 years old, still standing as one of television's great survivors. In recent years, she has continued appearing on shows like Days of Our Lives, receiving lifetime honors, and mentoring younger artists. Her estimated net worth of about $4 million, including her Granada Hills home, reflects not luck, but endurance, control, and the rare victory of outlasting an industry that once tried to silence her. Helen Martin as Pearl Shea. Pearl Shea, the sharp-tongued, ever-watchful neighbor in 227, 1985 to 1990, was portrayed by Helen Martin. At 76 years old, she joined the series in 1985, becoming one of the oldest regular cast members on a primetime sitcom. Her age gave the character authority, but it also reflected how late recognition finally arrived. Helen Dorothy Martin, born July 23, 1909 in St. Louis, Missouri, and raised in Nashville, Tennessee, spent most of her life fighting to be seen in an industry that rarely valued Black women beyond stereotypes. Despite decades of stage work, television confined her to narrowly defined roles. Even as audiences remembered her from Good Times and later 227, Hollywood continued to offer her only supporting parts, repeating the same elderly, outspoken woman image that limited both creative growth and financial reward. The strain of a long career without true stability took its toll. Helen lived with constant anxiety about work drying up, knowing each role could be her last. Though she appeared late in films such as Bulworth, these projects came sporadically. Behind the humor audiences loved was a woman carrying decades of professional frustration. In her later years, Martin struggled with heart disease, a condition that worsened with age and exhaustion. She had never married and had no children, and as her health declined, the solitude became heavier. Work had been her only anchor. She continued accepting small roles whenever possible, determined not to disappear quietly. Sadly, Helen Martin died on March 25, 2000, at 90 years old from a heart attack in Monterey, California. Her estimated net worth of about $1 million came from modest property and lifelong labor, an ending that shocked many who assumed fame had brought far more comfort than it ever did. Hal Williams as Lester Jenkins. Lester Jenkins, the calm, principled husband in 227, 1985 to 1990, was portrayed by Hal Williams. At 47 years old, he brought quiet authority and emotional steadiness to a sitcom built on sharp humor and strong personalities. His presence felt grounding, but behind it stood a career already shaped by limits. Halroy Candace Williams, born December 14, 1938 in Columbus, Ohio, built a solid reputation early on. Yet after gaining recognition as Officer Smitty on Sanford and Son, that success became a double-edged sword. Casting directors struggled to see beyond the uniform. Even while appearing in respected projects like The Waltons and Private Benjamin, he was repeatedly sidelined for roles that never matched his range or maturity. Professionally stable but creatively constrained, Williams spent decades working without momentum. Roles came, but rarely led anywhere larger. After 227 ended, opportunities narrowed further, pushing him into guest appearances and supporting parts, rather than leading arcs. The frustration was quiet, persistent, and largely invisible to the public. His personal life carried its own weight. Williams married and divorced twice, including a painful split from Dr. Renee Himes. Those separations left lasting emotional scars, compounded by the instability that often shadows actors whose careers plateau rather than peak. Now Hal Williams is 88 years old, still alive and occasionally appearing on screen, including a late career return in Matlock, 2024 to 2025. His estimated net worth of about $1 million, largely from a California home and decades of steady work, reflects endurance rather than reward. Paul Winfield as Julian C. Barlow. Julian C. Barlow, the wealthy, manipulative landlord who owned the apartment building and frequently clashed with Mary Jenkins in 227, 1988 to 1990, was portrayed by Paul Winfield. At 49 years old, he joined the series in 1988, bringing quiet authority to its final season. The role masked a lifetime of battles few viewers ever suspected. Paul Edward Winfield, born May 22, 1939, in Dallas, Texas, grew up navigating instability, racial barriers, and constant reinvention. His early career was marked by brilliance and limitation at the same time. Despite an Oscar nomination for Sounder, 1972, and acclaim for portraying Martin Luther King Jr. in King, Hollywood repeatedly typecast him as figures of authority, rarely allowing emotional vulnerability. Behind professional success was relentless pressure. Paul was a gay black man in a deeply hostile industry, forced to guard his private life to survive professionally. Relationships stayed hidden, affection muted, joy delayed. Though he worked steadily, appearing in Roots, The Next Generation's Queen, and later Mars Attacks, the emotional cost of concealment accumulated quietly over decades. His body paid its own price. Winfield struggled for years with obesity and diabetes, conditions worsened by stress and an unforgiving schedule. Health scares became frequent, yet he continued working, lending his voice to City Confidential and animation projects, determined not to slow down. In hard time, Paul lived with his longtime partner Charles Gillen Jr., finally finding stability away from the spotlight. After Gillen's death from cancer in 2002, Paul's health declined further. Sadly, he died on March 7, 2004 at 64 years old from a fatal heart attack in Los Angeles. His estimated net worth of $3 million, including property and awards, could not measure the cost of a life spent excelling while hiding, nor the quiet courage it took to endure it. Curtis Baldwin as Calvin Dobbs. Calvin Dobbs, the fast-talking, energetic teenager in 227, 1985 to 1990, was portrayed by Curtis Baldwin. At just 18 years old when the series began in 1985, he entered adulthood under studio lights, sharing the screen with performers twice his age while still figuring out who he was. Curtis Baldwin, born November 25, 1967, in Los Angeles, California, faced a harsh reality when 227 ended. Unlike some of his co-stars, offers slowed quickly. Guest roles on shows like Family Matters followed, but the momentum never returned. The transition from child actor to adult performer proved unforgiving, leaving him adrift in an industry that had already moved on. Career uncertainty pushed Baldwin toward reinvention. He explored stand-up comedy, then gradually shifted into music production under the name Raw Rizzo. The pivot was necessary, not glamorous. Building credibility again, from scratch, meant starting without the safety net television once provided. Today, Curtis Baldwin is 59 years old, working behind the scenes in music and independent projects like Bomb Pizza and Shoot the Pitch Roll the Clip. His estimated net worth of about $1 million, earned through acting and music, tells a quieter story of survival, reinvention, and the heavy cost of growing up on television when the cameras stop caring. Elena Reed Hall as Rose Lee Holloway. Rose Lee Holloway, the thoughtful, composed sister in 227, 1985 to 1990, was portrayed by Elena Reed Hall. At 39 years old, she joined the series in 1985, balancing emotional warmth with quiet strength. Her performance suggested stability, even as her real life grew increasingly fragile. Born Bernice Ruth Reed on November 10, 1946, she was raised in the Midwest and trained extensively in theater and music. Early success on Sesame Street brought national recognition, but it also locked her into a narrow identity. In Hollywood, she was repeatedly typecast as the strong black woman, limiting her opportunities to explore deeper or more vulnerable characters. While juggling Sesame Street and 227, she endured relentless travel between New York and Los Angeles, a schedule that drained both body and spirit. Career pressure intensified after 227 ended. Though she appeared in films such as Death Becomes Her and later Cruel Intentions, these roles were brief reminders of potential rather than resurgence. Television guest spots followed, but momentum never fully returned. The stress of sustaining relevance in a shrinking space weighed heavily on her confidence and mental health. Her life changed irrevocably with illness and loss. In 1991, her second husband, actor Kevin Peter Hall, died from AIDS-related pneumonia after contracting HIV through a contaminated blood transfusion. The grief was compounded by responsibility, 2 children, mounting fear, and later her own diagnosis of breast cancer in 2007. Treatment was exhausting, painful, and isolating, yet she rarely spoke publicly about her suffering. Finally, she died on December 17, 2009, at 63 years old in Santa Monica, California, after a 2-year battle with cancer. Her ashes were scattered into the Pacific Ocean quietly, without ceremony. Her estimated net worth of $2 million stood in stark contrast to the emotional cost of a life spent surviving far more than the audience ever knew. Regina King as Brenda Jenkins. Brenda Jenkins, the outspoken, observant teenager in 227, 1985 to 1990, was portrayed by Regina King. At 14 years old, she grew up on screen while millions watched. It was a rare early start that promised everything, and quietly demanded more than most children could give. Regina Renee King, born January 15, 1971, in Los Angeles County, California, entered the industry before she was old enough to understand its cost. While 227 brought stability, it also placed adult expectations on a child. As she transitioned into films like Boys in the Hood and Friday, success followed, but so did pressure to prove she was more than the sitcom kid. Hollywood rewarded her talent, yet never slowed down long enough to let her rest. Her career soared into rare territory. Wins followed: Emmys, a Golden Globe, and an Academy Award for If Beale Street Could Talk. She expanded behind the camera, directing One Night in Miami, and became a symbol of excellence. But achievement did not shield her from loss. Public admiration grew while private pain deepened. That pain became unbearable in 2022, when her only son, Ian Alexander Jr., died by suicide at 26. The loss shattered her world, triggering profound grief and periods of depression she later spoke about with raw honesty. For the first time, her strength was tested not by career obstacles, but by survival itself. Today, Regina King is 55 years old, still working, directing, and choosing projects with intention rather than urgency. She continues to advocate for mental health awareness while carrying grief that never truly leaves. Her estimated net worth of about $16 million, including Los Angeles property and vehicles, reflects success. But no amount has softened the quiet absence that defines her life now. Jackie Harry as Sandra Clark. Sandra Clark, the sharp-tongued, stylish rival in 227, 1985 to 1990, was portrayed by Jackie Harry. At 29 years old, she joined the series in 1985, instantly commanding attention. Laughter followed her every scene, but peace did not. Jacqueline Yvonne Harry, born August 14, 1956, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, rose quickly, yet paid a lasting price. Winning the first Emmy ever awarded to a black woman in her category should have opened doors. Instead, it locked her into one image. After 227, producers wanted Sandra again and again, loud, flamboyant, comedic, leaving little room for growth despite later success on Sister, Sister, and The First Family. Career uncertainty lingered between projects. While audiences laughed, Jackie fought to stay relevant in an industry that moved on quickly from women once they aged past a certain point. Work came in waves, never guarantees. Reinvention became survival, not choice. Her personal life mirrored that instability. A marriage to Elgin Charles Williams ended in divorce in 2003, and despite later success, she often spoke indirectly about loneliness. She had no biological children, and as peers built families, solitude became an unspoken companion. By 2026, Jackie Harry is 70 years old, still working steadily, most recently on Days of Our Lives, refusing to disappear. Her estimated net worth of about $6.5 million, including Los Angeles property and vehicles, reflects longevity. But behind the success stands a woman who learned early that laughter on screen does not guarantee warmth when the cameras stop. Rinonaldo Ray as Ray the Mailman. Ray the Mailman, the familiar joking mail carrier in 227, 1986, was portrayed by Rinonaldo Ray. At 46 years old, he stepped into a small but recognizable role that briefly placed him inside mainstream television. It looked like a breakthrough, but it was far from stability. Born Harold Reynolds on January 27, 1940, in Sequoia County, Oklahoma, Ray's career was built on hustle rather than opportunity. He began as a stand-up comedian and stage performer, touring relentlessly, yet Hollywood rarely saw him as more than comic relief. Even as he appeared in films like Harlem Nights, 1989, and later Friday, 1995, the roles were supporting, disposable, and poorly paid. The transition from comedy clubs to film sets brought visibility, but it also left him in constant financial tension. The frustration deepened as he aged. Ray wanted dramatic roles, layered characters, and longevity, but casting doors stayed half-closed. He juggled television guest spots, small film roles, and self-produced comedy projects just to remain relevant. The laughter audiences enjoyed masked a career spent fighting to avoid being forgotten. His personal life offered little refuge. Married to Evelyn, Ray's relationship was turbulent, marked by separation and emotional strain. They had children, Yet domestic instability and career stress weighed heavily on him. Health issues followed, most notably a stroke, which weakened him physically and mentally, forcing him to slow down at a time when he could least afford to stop. Yet, Ray continued appearing when possible, relying on conventions, minor roles, and comedy recordings. He died on May 28, 2015, at 75 years old in Los Angeles from complications related to a stroke, and was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, Hollywood Hills. His estimated net worth of about $1 million, largely from his Los Angeles home and personal assets, stood as a quiet reminder of how much effort it took just to survive in an industry that never truly embraced him. Wittman Mayo as Henry Hurley. Henry Hurley, the older, well-mannered gentleman who appeared as a neighbor and social acquaintance of the Jenkins family in 227, 1986, was portrayed by Wittman Mayo. At 56 years old, he carried decades of experience into a role that came and went without changing his fate. To audiences, he was familiar. To Hollywood, he was already labeled. Born Wittman Blount Mayo Jr. on November 15, 1929 in New York City and raised in Harlem and Queens, Mayo built his career slowly and honestly. His defining role as Grady Wilson on Sanford and Son brought fame, but also a trap. After the show ended, producers saw only Grady, no matter how many auditions he took. Even appearances in films like Boys in the Hood and DC Cab failed to reset his image, leading to long periods of unemployment and financial instability. The disappointment forced reinvention. Mayo took work wherever he could find it, teaching drama, counseling troubled youth, even opening a small travel agency to survive. He appeared sporadically on shows like In the Heat of the Night, Full House, and Kenan and Kel, but the momentum never returned. Being recognized everywhere yet cast nowhere became a painful irony of his later career. His personal life reflected similar unrest. Mayo married several times, each relationship ending in separation or divorce, leaving him searching for lasting companionship well into old age. He had no children of his own, and the loneliness of later years grew heavier as work slowed and health declined. In his final years, Mayo lived quietly in Atlanta, teaching and making occasional appearances when health allowed. He died on May 22, 2001, at 70 years old, from a heart attack at Grady Memorial Hospital. His estimated net worth of about $1 million, including property and memorabilia, could not compensate for the emotional cost of a career defined by one role and the silence that followed it. Kevin Peter Hall as Warren Merriweather. Warren Merriweather, the kind, soft-spoken love interest who later became Rose Lee Holloway's husband in 227, 1989-1990, was portrayed by Kevin Peter Hall. At 34 years old, he joined the series in 1989, finally appearing on screen without a mask. For once, audiences saw the man, not the creature. Kevin Peter Hall, born May 9, 1955 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, carried a body that both defined and confined his career. Standing 7 feet 2 inches, he entered Hollywood already boxed in by his height. Before recognition came, money was scarce, and opportunity narrower still. Roles in Prophecy, Without Warning, and Monster in the Closet paid bills, but they erased identity. Even after global success in Predator, 1987, and the warmth he brought to Harry and the Hendersons, 1987, the industry continued to hide him behind latex, prosthetics, and silence. The physical demands of those roles were brutal. Hours inside suffocating suits, limited oxygen, extreme heat, and constant strain wore down his body. Yet Kevin kept accepting the work, afraid that refusing meant disappearing. While others saw prestige in Predator and later Predator 2, he felt the quiet frustration of knowing his face and his range remained unseen. His health collapsed after a devastating car accident, which required surgery and a blood transfusion contaminated with HIV. The diagnosis came quietly, but its consequences were swift. Kevin developed AIDS, and his strength declined rapidly. As his immune system failed, work slowed, hospital visits increased, and the future he had only just begun to imagine started closing in. At that time, he had recently married Elena Reed Hall, finding genuine happiness just as illness took control. He died on April 10, 1991, at 35 years old, from AIDS-related pneumonia, leaving behind his wife and children. His estimated net worth of about $500,000 from a modest Hollywood home and film memorabilia stood in heartbreaking contrast to the legacy he might have built had time been kinder. Ron Glass as Robert Stone. Robert Stone, the educated, articulate professional who appeared as a romantic interest within the Jenkins family circle in 227, 1987, was portrayed by Ron Glass. At 42 years old, he slipped into the ensemble with quiet confidence. It was another solid role, but not the security it appeared to be. Ronald Earl Glass, born July 10, 1945 in Evansville, Indiana, entered Hollywood armed with education, discipline, and undeniable talent. His breakthrough on Barney Miller brought acclaim and an Emmy Award, yet it also locked him into comedic, intellectual archetypes. For years after, he was reliable but replaceable, constantly working, yet rarely advancing. Even as he moved through shows like The New Odd Couple, Mr. Rhodes, and Friends, financial uncertainty lingered, forcing him to accept guest roles simply to stay afloat. Behind the steady resume was exhaustion. Ron was repeatedly typecast as the witty, refined side character, trusted but never fully invested in. Serious dramatic opportunities were scarce, and for long stretches, the phone simply stopped ringing. It wasn't until much later, through Firefly and Serenity, that a new generation finally recognized his depth. By then, much of his career had already been spent waiting. Health challenges followed quietly. Ron struggled in later years with respiratory illness, a condition that gradually weakened him. He never married and had no children, choosing a deeply private life shaped by Buddhist practice and solitude. What looked like peace from the outside often masked isolation, especially as work slowed and his health deteriorated. He died on November 25, 2016, at 71 years old, from respiratory failure, and was buried at Rose Hills Memorial Park in Whittier, California. His estimated net worth of around $3 million, including property and rare books, was left largely to friends, an ending as quiet and restrained as the man himself. Julius Kerry as Dale Evans. Dale Evans, the confident, charismatic man who entered the story as a short-term romantic interest in 227, 1986, was portrayed by Julius Kerry. At 34 years old, he appeared on the series in 1986, fresh from rising visibility. It seemed like the start of something bigger. It wasn't. Julius John Kerry III, born March 12, 1952, and raised in Chicago, Illinois, burst into pop culture with explosive force as Sho'nuff in The Last Dragon. The role made him unforgettable and instantly trapped. Casting directors could see the villain, the bravado, the physical presence, but not the actor beneath. Despite appearances in Murphy Brown, Family Matters, and A Different World, substantial leading roles never followed, leaving his career uneven and emotionally draining. The frustration deepened as years passed. Julius worked constantly, yet progress stalled. He moved between television guest spots and supporting film roles, including World Gone Wild and The Fish That Saved Pittsburgh, knowing he had more to offer than what he was given. The gap between potential and reality became a quiet source of regret, especially as younger actors passed him by. His personal life reflected similar turbulence. Julius married twice, both relationships ending in divorce. He had no children, and later admitted to carrying deep personal regret, especially as stability continued to elude him. Illness arrived without warning. Pancreatic cancer, aggressive and unforgiving, cutting short any chance of reinvention. He died on August 19, 2008, at 56 years old, at his home in Studio City, Los Angeles. His estimated net worth of about $2 million, including his home and vehicles, was left to family, closing the story of a man remembered for one iconic role but burdened by all the others he was never allowed to play. Della Reese as Grace, the strong-willed, no-nonsense woman who appeared as a close friend and authority figure within the Jenkins extended social circle in 227-1987, was portrayed by Della Reese. At 56 years old, she joined the series in 1987, stepping into the role with the authority of a woman who had already lived several lifetimes. By then, fame had found her, but peace had not. Della Reese Patricia Early, born July 6, 1931, in Detroit, Michigan, spent years fighting to be taken seriously after transitioning from music to acting. Despite chart-topping songs like Don't You Know and national recognition as the first black woman to host her own talk show, Hollywood treated her acting ambitions with skepticism. Even after strong performances in projects like Harlem Nights and later Touched by an Angel, she found herself typecast as the wise maternal figure, admired but creatively confined. Financial pressure followed her longer than audiences realized, especially during career shifts that required starting over in her 40s and 50s. Her personal life carried deeper wounds. One of her marriages turned violent, leaving scars she rarely discussed publicly. The greatest blow came with the death of her adopted daughter in 2002, a loss that shattered her sense of family and never fully healed. Reese carried her grief quietly, channeling pain into ministry, faith, and work, while continuing to appear strong in public. Health challenges compounded the burden. Reese lived for decades with type 2 diabetes, along with the aftermath of earlier near-fatal accidents, including a brain aneurysm and severe injuries that required extensive surgery. As she aged, the disease worsened, forcing her into periods of wheelchair use and repeated hospitalizations. Still, she continued filming, preaching, and writing when her body allowed. She died on November 19, 2017, at 86 years old, at her home in Los Angeles. Her estimated net worth of around $3 million, including property and personal assets, was left to loved ones, closing the life of a woman admired for strength, but forged through relentless suffering. 30 years later, the laughter of 227 still echoes, but the lives behind it tell a far more complicated story of loss, resilience, and survival. Some rose higher than anyone expected. Others paid a quiet price long after the applause faded. So now we ask you, which transformation shocked you the most, and whose story stayed with you after the screen went dark? Leave a comment below, share this video with fellow fans, and don't forget to subscribe for more then and now stories that reveal what really happened after the sitcom Smiles disappeared.